Hey guys, this is Alex from TDBR. Welcome to the show. On today's episode, me and my co-host Austin will be doing a loose analysis of the infamous film Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. As always, we highly suggest watching the film before listening to the show. The less you know about this movie going in, the more you'll enjoy it. If you don't care about spoilers, go ahead and jump in. And of course, if you enjoyed the show, we'd appreciate it if you subscribed and gave us a rating. Thanks for listening.
All right, young guy, we're live. So,
What's up, man?
you suggested Psycho, 1960,
I did.
by the old Alfred Hitchcock, the legendary filmmaker director.
I originally wanted to do this movie for like October,
Uh-huh.
like specifically for just like a Halloween theme,
Mhm.
like trying to get like into like slasher films and stuff.
Mhm.
But due to like scheduling conflicts, me and you are both busy men. We are recording this on November 2nd.
It's all right.
It's the eve of Election Day.
Fuck.
Yeah.
It is. Well, good luck, America. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah.
Kanye West, 2020. So before we hop into this, let's go ahead and say you picked the beer tonight.
I did.
You know,
Tonight we're drinking Zombie Dust. It's made by Three Floyds. It's a pale ale, and what do you think about this beer so far?
it's really hazy. It's really dry. Like, if you're not used to drinking this, like, this is not a beer you bring to a party of those who don't like craft beer, to say the least. Like,
Definitely not.
this is
No.
this is a beer that you cannot drink more than a few of these without really feeling the cost of entry. Like, it's a taxing beer, in my opinion.
I agree.
I mean,
I want to say this is the only one I'll drink tonight. Like I'll
I'm
switch
on-
over to
yeah.
Miller High Life after this.
Yeah.
But I can't speak for my drunk self.
yeah,
In 2 hours from now, once the podcast is done recording,
yeah.
I might crack another one open.
Yeah, oh yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. It's different. Like, if you're drinking these in succession, it's gonna come on you pretty fast. And we already had a little pregame, so
Yeah.
it's kind of risky. What are they, like 8, something like that? Probably close somewhere.
What, 8%?
Yeah,
I think they're 6.
6.
6.2 maybe.
Maybe it just tastes so bitter because it's really hoppy, really hazy.
Because that one that Star Crusher IPA
Yeah,
is like way smoother than this.
yeah.
But that's like almost 9%.
yeah, which is the most delicious beer of all time.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
For sure.
It's just the hoppiness makes it. It's you definitely don't forget that you're drinking it. That's for sure. It doesn't go down very smooth, but I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it.
I think you might ease into it though. Like the more you drink it, it
Yeah.
might start to taste a little bit better.
Yeah, it's beers like this. It's like they don't let you forget that you're drinking them. In my opinion, like
Mhm.
just because of the flavor is so strong, it's so bitter. Like I said, it's definitely not a party beer. That's for damn sure. But it's a good one. I really like it.
I don't gauge my beer drinking on like craft brewery nerdery.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
But when I look this beer up, it's ranked number 39 in the world. Now what I like out of all beers. Now do I agree with that? I don't know. I don't think so.
I guess since we don't like sit there and like taste our beers, like I don't know where I put in my ranking, but to me it just tastes like every other hazy type of IPA style.
I agree.
Really bitter.
It doesn't stick out to me, but
I feel like I've drinking this beer before on a different label. Like,
Yeah.
in my opinion, but it's good. I mean, it's a good beer. Like we've had like the Listerman, the one. Remember the Listerman I bought? That had the Samuel Jackson on the front of it.
What was that shit called?
It was called. It's called. I'm so tired of these motherfucking IPAs from this motherfucking brewery.
Yeah.
because it was referencing Snakes on a Plane.
I'll remember that beer because of the name and the label,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
And that stuff was good too.
It tastes very similar in my opinion.
I think that one had like a juicier taste to it. Like
It had more like citrusy. This is like just really dry.
yeah.
I don't know. It kind of tastes like grapefruit. I mean, that's why I like it so much. I could eat grapefruit like nothing. Like some people like just scoff and like just like.
Dude, I'm the total opposite. I do not like grapefruit at all.
Oh, really?
But I like IPAs a whole lot, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like IPAs are the grapefruit of beer.
They are. I like the ones that are a little bit more juicier.
Yeah, this isn't super juicy. It's good though.
I only got this because it's called Zombie Dust, and I thought it would like go along with the horror theme that we're doing today.
Oh, absolutely.
But that was my line of thinking right there.
It's delicious though. No knocking on the beer. It's a good beer.
Yeah, I like it.
Speaking of horror, we'll hop into it.
Yeah, we watched Psycho.
Yeah.
From 1960.
Yeah. You weren't lying when you were kind of in the last podcast. You've referenced the era of a movie that we had done. We had done Current with Manchester, and we have done the Terminator, which has not been released because it's impossible to convert.
That's the lost episode
that you will never be able to enjoy. Maybe we'll figure it out one of these days. But
I'm glad we watched it though.
Oh, it's so good.
I loved it.
I did too. That was a great movie. It was a perfect movie to start with too. It got us really comfortable.
Yeah.
But when we're talking era of film, this is a movie when it was made. It kind of was very important because it destroyed kind of like the social norm of the time.
It broke all the rules.
Yeah. Just because we have not lived in that time, but we probably we know people, and you can tell, like grandparents and great grandparents that like have always lived a life of like the standard U.S. life is like back then was working class dad and stay at home mom and like reservation and like. You wouldn't talk how we talk now back then. Like the world is a lot more not dirty, but it has like you're able to talk about things publicly and like so
in the 60s.
Yeah, in the 60s like, you can't do that. Like talking about sex or violence is just like appalling.
It was very taboo like in the mainstream.
Yeah.
This movie broke a lot of those rules.
Well, if we open up the movie, the first scene is our main character. Well, questionable. Well,
who we think is our main character?
Well, I was going to say Norman Bates is our main character, in my opinion, but I think our quote-unquote main character that starts our movie is only a catalyst to show the true main character of the movie.
Yeah. It just springs forward the events.
Yeah. So we're opening up in I believe either a motel hotel.
Either that or someone's apartment or something.
I don't think it's her. Maybe it is her apartment. But
she's like post. Like these two people like just got done doing it.
Yeah, they just had sex.
So yeah, our introduction to the characters are like they're in their underwear.
Yeah.
The very first scene of the movie.
Which women don't get portrayed like this in movies either. They are not in their bra and like lingerie.
At the time.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And so that's why it's very taboo. Like it's just when, like speaking of like reservation, like women just don't get shown like this to the public. And it's like, you got to think in the terms of like evangelical Christian type setting of how like America is viewed, in my opinion. Like it's just there's just this reservation in the public, and like you just don't speak like that. Like, and you don't show or talk about things like this at the time, and it like progressed that forward.
I could imagine this being controversial at the time.
Only to add to the greatness of this movie, because there's only such good thing as good publicity. There's no such thing as bad publicity.
And there's more controversial themes that get introduced later on.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that at the end.
But
sure. So
progressive for the time, probably.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So the main character is Marion Crane. She's a secretary at a bank, and so, or not a bank.
Some kind of small business.
Yeah. It's like I would say maybe like a loan company or like maybe they have to do something that I'm not 100% sure because they're not in a bank.
I don't think the movie doesn't really specify.
No. But we open up with Marion and then Sam.
Sam Loomis.
Yeah, her like boyfriend or like
They have some kind of relationship, but their first conversation in that hotel or apartment, it seems that like Sam Loomis is in the middle of he's either divorced or in the middle of a divorce. So there's like kind of like a taboo vibe to Marion Crane and Sam Loomis's relationship.
You got to think they're having sex out of wedlock too, so that's probably only contributes to the controversy.
Yeah,
and they are talking of like getting married. He's talking about paying alimony to his ex-wife, and like she's not married, and she's like, it's kind of weird to see their dialogue because it kind of shows the time. It's just not very fluent by today's standards, in my opinion. It's just it's almost poetic in a way.
like as far as like portraying like natural dialogue between two human beings.
Yeah, it's like almost like Shakespearean in a way, like with the English language.
Yeah, it's definitely indicative of the time that it came from.
It's like everything is formality.
I can't lie though. I'm kind of a fan of this like this way of speaking in movies. Like it's it feels kind of special watching this shit back.
It kind of it adds it's almost like you have to think of the dialogue a little bit more. Like the words actually mean a little bit more when they're done up in this way. Like it's like Shakespeare. Like you have to think of the way it's being spoken. Like the words have meaning and the words aren't wasted in a way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's hard to describe dialogue without hearing it. Like watching the movie. By the way, if you're listening to this without watching the movie, please do us a favor, watch the movie, come back. You'll appreciate it a lot more when you come back because there's a lot to this movie that I think everybody can enjoy.
I agree with that. For the longest time, I put off watching classic movies that were old, like because they were old.
You feel like they're gonna waste your time
in a way, just because like we've made so many like advancements in the years, like succeeding it. I feel dumb for saying this, but old stuff is really good.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's just refreshing because when you're like, if you're only looking at things by progress of like year and like movies, like you're just like waiting for if you're waiting for the next movie to come out, like you're only waiting for the better special effects and like hopefully they don't botch the fucking movie that you're about to watch, like because there's a lot of shitty movies that come out in my opinion.
Yeah,
especially on the horror side today.
Yeah, definitely.
Like just shitty horror movies that just get made for no reason.
They're just made to make like a buck most of the time,
and they usually fail and have terrible critic review, and they're just like. I think the only like the recent movie that I think that really deserves the like horror thriller title is The Lighthouse, which in my opinion, I know you haven't seen, but it pulled a lot of like themes from this movie in my opinion. Like I couldn't help but think the way both movies end and the way suspense is made, and they're both black and white. Which The Lighthouse I think was made in 2019.
Yeah,
and it's a departure from a normal movie, and by the stand, it's an A24 film, indie horror. Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe, like very serious actors, in my opinion.
God, this is still on my my watch list. I
may have to do it.
I really want to see The Lighthouse.
Maybe if it lines up next Halloween, maybe I may suggest it, or if I just am in the mood to watch it, we'll have to suggest it.
Hopefully, I see it before then.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's in my opinion a little bit more fucked up than this movie, but so anyway,
there's almost 60 years in between.
Yeah,
like The Lighthouse has, it's like pushing the envelope is probably a lot farther now than whatever 1960 or whatever.
This is before. This movie is made in black and white. In that movie, the Lighthouse is chosen to be black and white.
Interesting fact, actually, this movie. The black and white is an artistic choice. In preparation for doing this podcast, I watched another Alfred Hitchcock movie, a movie called Rear Window, and it came out in 1954.
So it was the movie. It was
And that movie was in color.
Okay.
So 6 years preceding.
So it is an artistic choice. Okay, good.
They actually did it censor the blood, for the most part.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What is it? Is this movie rated R or is it rated PG-13 by the time? Because
I'm pretty sure it's rated R.
I was gonna say. It is rated R.
I would like to think so.
Yeah, because it's weird because some things get passed as PG and they can have nudity in it, and it's like Airplane, for example, is a movie I think it was made in the 80s or the early 70s. Either 70s or 80s. I'm sorry, it's leaving me right now, but that movie has like blatant nudity in it, and it's rated PG. And so like I was just curious because the rating back then was just a lot different.
There was no PG-13 at the time.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Because if you've ever seen, I haven't seen Indiana Jones, but that movie is rated PG, and there's someone's head explodes in the movie.
Yeah, and in the Crystal Skull, I believe, or whatever the third installment of those are. I think someone's face melts and stuff like that.
I think that's what I'm thinking of, actually.
Not explode. Yeah, but their face melts when they open the ark.
Yeah.
So yeah,
you could say shit in a PG movie back in the day,
like Sandlot.
Yeah. Nowadays, that'd be a hard PG-13.
PG-13. Okay. So anyway, back into it. They're in the hotel room. God, it's so easy to get off track.
I like when we get off track.
I do too. But just for the sake of time, he has to leave. He has to leave, and she has to go back to work. She's on a lunch break.
Yeah.
And that's hilarious. They're having sex on their lunch break, which is just another thing to add to the controversy.
I'd much rather just go eat lunch on my lunch break.
Yeah, she's taking an extended lunch break. But he's from out of town. He's from California, and I believe they're in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes.
And so he has to come visit to see her, and has to this is an event for them. And so, but anyway, they're talking of getting married, and it's kind of, up in the air. And so, but she leaves and goes back to work, and, he's headed back to California, which is, I believe, Fairvale, California.
I think so.
And she goes back to the bank, and we get introduced to a young other secretary, and they're having their conversation, and then the boss of the, I don't know if it's some sort of real estate, but he's looking at buying a deed to a house for his daughter.
Yeah.
The customer, the client.
This cowboy looking guy.
This Doug Dimmadome looking motherfucker.
This guy was probably the inspiration for Doug Dimmadome. I mean, all the way.
That and Sheriff Jones.
Oh, in Ohio?
Yeah. If anybody knows who Sheriff Jones is, you'll understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But he's buying this $40,000. He's paying for this house in cash, which is $40,000, and the boss, and he's kind of flirting with Marion and is trying to say how much money he has, gloating and talking to her, and so she gives him $40,000 in cash, or he gives her $40,000 in cash, and the boss is like, I don't want this in the office. Take it to the bank, safe deposit, and I'll have him write a check.
The Doug Dimmadome character is so overly cocky.
Yeah.
In this part, he's like, well, I would never carry any cash on me that I can't lose. Yeah. Or whatever. Which he changes his tune later on.
Yeah, because Marion is saying that I have a headache and I would like to go home right after I go to the bank. And she doesn't go home. Well, she does go home, but doesn't go to the bank.
We do get the scene where she has the cash laying on the bed, and she's contemplating whether she's done the right thing or not. Because she didn't go to the bank when she was supposed to. She kept the cash on her.
Yeah. And I was going to say, this is one of the first parts of the movie where it's show, don't tell. Mm-hmm. There isn't a lot of dialogue in a lot of scenes, and it's most, especially leading up to kind of the plot and the exposition and all this stuff. It's I'm showing you that I have the cash, and I'm putting it in my suitcase and taking all my clothes with me. It's not directly, there's no other character to sit there and progress this, so we have to be shown visually what she's doing.
And her mannerisms, like when she's like packing it up and contemplating, you can tell that she's like conflicted a little bit. Like she doesn't, like she's like a girl that's played by the rules her whole life.
Point, yeah.
And now she's like, I'm gonna make a run for it,
yeah.
basically.
And so she does, and as she's leaving town, she sees her boss on the street, and because him and the client, Doug Dimmadome, are going to get a drink after work. It was already explained back at the office. And so he sees her, and he's like, and she just has this nervousness and anxiety to her through the rest of these scenes, where, you know, he kind of waves and, you know, as in pleasantry, like, hey, like, how's it going? Like, funny to see you here. But, you know,
well, he kind of gives like a second look though.
Yeah,
like he kind of like gives her the old stink eye.
Yeah, like,
like, why are you leaving town?
Or like, why are you out and about when you had that headache? And, you know, you're supposed to be at home taking in. So it's just kind of like, you know, but don't have a second thought about it. And I forget how it moves on. I believe she just starts driving.
Yeah, we get these like exposition scenes kind of where she's driving, and like the first time I saw the movie I was a little confused because you hear voiceovers from like other characters, like you're watching Marion Crane drive, but you hear the voice of the boss.
Yeah, this is the first time they do it.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if like it was like her anxiety, like thinking about the conversations that he might be having, or if like the movie is just telling us this is the conversation that the boss is having.
Yeah.
But you would think they would like film a scene where like we see the boss saying these things. Maybe it's a limitation at the time.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know.
I think they're trying to explain what everyone else is thinking, but it's also her internal dialogue, kind of.
Yeah.
Like what she is thinking about, what all other characters are thinking, and like, she's like trying to figure out this puzzle that she's put herself in. Like they're talking about, you know, when she's out and about, or, you know, it's kind of like, oh, she would never do something like that kind of thing. Like, but it's the like, voiceover from the other characters. Just it's different.
Like, she's like worked here for 10 years, and yeah, I think I could trust her.
Yeah,
or whatever.
And but like she is tired because she's obviously taking a trip from Arizona all the way to California. Like you can kind of tell, like, where's she going? And like there's it's like some dead air, so like it gives the viewer time to think. Like you are thinking about what is she doing, like, because it doesn't tell you. You have to figure it out. Like you have to pay attention. But I think it starts raining and she pulls over. Like it's
prior to the raining, she pulls over to fall asleep.
Yeah, it doesn't rain yet.
Yeah. That's the catalyst for going to the Bates Motel.
Yes.
She pulls over off the side of the road and sleeps in her car, and she's awoken the next morning by a police officer knocking at her window. I love this scene.
I do too. It's really weird because when I was watching it, I was viewing it like this officer's facial expressions remind me of Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator with his glasses on. His aviator glasses are like blacked out, and he's like, is everything all right? And she's like, yeah, everything's cool. And, you know, obviously she has $40,000 in her purse, and she's like, I'd like to go. Like, if I haven't broken any laws, I'd like to leave. And he's like, And she's like, is there something wrong? And he's like, well, frankly, like, everything doesn't seem all right.
She acts pretty fishy in this scene.
Like, if this was like a normal pull-over stop for a cop, it's like, there's drugs in the car, something's off. Like, she gives him her license. God, this is so fucking difficult.
We took a shot of Jaeger before we recorded this, so please forgive us.
There's some pregame involved. I'm sorry, we're only 25 minutes in, but still. But she's like hiding. She's trying to hide the cash, like turn away. And the way it's filmed, there's a lot of tightness of the scene on the camera.
Like the close-ups.
Yeah.
Right? Because we get like a super close-up on the cop's face.
Yeah.
And he like, the way the film makes it look, he's like really imposing.
Yeah. He's like inspecting the situation. And that's one of the things I'll say, like the camera work is like there isn't a lot of breathing room as far as like visually, like in the movie. Just because like you're zoomed in on her in the car, and it's like you're zoomed in on the road in when she's driving and in the rain.
Yeah.
And there's just not a lot of breathing room visually to let you relax. So your mind is always paying attention and is anxious as far as like the filmography goes.
I agree.
And he lets her go because there really is technically nothing wrong, but you can see that he's inspecting the plates, which is an Arizona plate, and
I think she's in California at this point, right? Like
yeah,
that's why it's fishy that she's got the Arizona plates.
Yeah, and so he's just really concerned the way she's acting, and you know she's out of state, and she's not playing it off very well.
You can tell that she's somebody that's like never really broken the law before, like. Yeah. She can't help but act like anxious and fidgety in the car.
She's never been in this situation before.
Yeah, so she's not good at faking being okay.
Yeah, but she gets let go, like everything's cool, but he follows her for a little while, and that kind of creates more tension because you can just see her looking in the rear view, and you can see behind behind the car because you're looking front
in the rear view mirror. Like the camera is facing the rear view mirror.
Yeah, and you can just see that the cop's following her for like an extended period of time until he finally gets off at a different exit and she starts to relax
for a short period.
Yeah, because
this next scene is kind of weird.
It's very fast. Like it's almost like she's making a split decision to sell her car.
Yeah, she stops at a car dealership. She's like trying to buy a new car. And like while she's having a discussion with the salesman, the cop pulls up to the car dealership across the street.
He like notices that she's there immediately and is like, that's odd that she's about to be in a car dealership. And he pulls over across the street and like is standing outside the car and like basically like posted up against his driver's side door, just watching across the street. And then she notices while they're having that conversation that he's over there.
Yeah, and her overall demeanor in this conversation with like the car salesman, she's like in a rush. She's like panicked, and she's like, "How much can I sell my car for?" Or like, "Can I trade my car for another one?"
Yeah,
and she's being so quick with the salesman that he's like, "Well, I've never been like strong armed by a customer before."
Yeah, he's like, "It's usually the salesman's the one pressing the customer."
Yeah,
it's very funny. Like it's a good way to just show the dynamic because it is true. Like a salesman is going to press you for a sale, and he like basically like highballs her on a sale, like your car plus $700, and she's like, okay, like doesn't negotiate.
I thought the scene was so weird because you would like the first time I saw the movie, I thought that she would skip out on buying a new car because the cop was watching.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm like she's buying a new car to get new plates, basically, like California plates.
Yeah, she's trying to basically leave the evidence.
Yeah,
for example,
like I was thinking like maybe she would want to like shake the tail of the law by doing this. But she's like doing it right in front of the cop.
Yeah.
That is already suspicious of her.
Yeah. And it's weird because he doesn't really get followed up. He doesn't follow up with it. And as she's pulling away, though, he pulls in. And the mechanic that was looking at her vehicle is like, hey, wait a second.
You forgot your suitcase.
You forgot your bags. And she's like, oh, you can just throw them in the back. And then she just skirts on out. And it's like... you get to see the mechanic, the officer, and the salesman, and it's just like they're like kind of like dumbfounded in a way. This is where you get the next like her internal dialogue voiceover, and they're like, "Officer, I've never seen a customer pay me in cash. She paid me in cash, pay me in $700 in cash, so she had $40,000 on her." I
like the 50 or not 50s. Well, I mean, like, it's only 1960, so it's probably 50s dialect. Yeah. Where the cop is like, does she seem like a wrong one to you? Like, I like that use of speech right there. Yeah, like, it's a funny old slang. But, I mean, they have every reason in the world to believe that she's suspicious.
Up to no good.
She's Marion Crane as a terrible criminal.
Yeah.
She's not good at this whole criminal thing.
No. But as she's continuing towards California, it begins to rain extremely hard. And she pulls off to the highway basically to stay because she's not going to, she's already had bad experience with sleeping in the car. So she's going to stay somewhere.
She pulls over to the very first thing she sees, which is the Bates Motel.
Yeah. Which is where we get introduced to my favorite main character. God, this is tough to talk about without.
No, this ain't too bad.
No, it's just so we get introduced to the
To Norman Bates.
To Norman Bates, which is the basically the maintenance, the caretaker of the Bates Motel.
He's like the only employee, really.
Yeah.
Like, he probably does everything.
Yeah,
really.
and
They have the scene where she's checking in and she writes down like a fake name,
which I can't remember what she puts down.
Marion Samuels, because her boyfriend's name is Sam, and she says she's from Los Angeles just because she had a copy of the Los Angeles Times with her.
Yeah, she gets a newspaper at the dealership. I was gonna pull up here just to double check through some of this so we don't forget anything, but. Yeah, she's having her conversation. He's like, yeah, well, no one ever stops by. I forget to turn, there's 12 cabins or something.
12 cabins, 12 vacancies.
Yeah. It's just like no one ever stops here because it's off. This is the old highway, and, no one ever stops off the old highway. Usually people that come here are the ones that came here by accident. It's really weird because he's like, he seems like a nice young man.
Yeah, like he's like slightly awkward, but there's nothing off-putting about him whatsoever.
No, he like is he's like trying to his best to be respectful and like not be intrusive of her business, and it's just like trying to make small talk in this, situation of like, yeah, no one ever stops here, but thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so like he's just basically setting her up, like, yeah, I'll set you up in room number 1. He's like, if you need anything, just knock on the wall.
Because she has the room, she gets room 1,
yeah,
which is right next to the receptionist's office.
Where they were just in. And he, like, walks her into the room and is like, hey, like, this is everything you need. Like, here's the bed, here's the dresser, closet, hangers. And then he's like, which is like the first point of awkwardness is like, here's the
bathroom,
and she's like,
he definitely says it with like with hesitation, in a way,
and she finishes the sentence for him. She's like, the bathroom. He's like, yeah, and and he opens the window. He's like, it's stuffy in here, and she's like hungry. She's like, I'm starving. I haven't eaten, and he's like, well, there's a diner up near like 10 miles away in Fairvale. She's like, oh, Fairvale's this close, because that's where Sam is.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of a little bit of an awkward conversation, and then he's suggesting, hey, why don't you come up to the house, because the house is basically up like a flight of stairs, like hill,
like right next to
the motel.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'll go ask my mother, because his mother is up in the house. And he's like, I'll go ask my mom if that's cool, like if you basically come eat dinner. And basically runs up, and she has the window is open, and so she can hear their conversation at the house.
They must have been talking really loud.
Yeah.
Within this house.
Because you can hear it.
It's crystal clear when these two people have a conversation.
It must be indicative of the time.
I guess so. It was just like exposition for the audience or whatever.
And basically, he gets yelled at by his mother, and basically
she chastises the fuck out of him.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have some, like, she doesn't say this directly, but basically, like, you're going to have this whore come in and eat our food? I don't think so.
Yeah. Like, tell her to fuck off, and, like, this is my house, and, like, my rules, basically.
Yeah.
It's, more or less. It's definitely done up in the, you're having, thanks, strangers, like, just really, really, like, awkward, and, like, Marion can hear this the whole time through the window. because the window has been cracked because the room is stuffy, because no one ever comes in. Well, basically, he brings her food, though. He brings her a sandwich.
Sandwiches and milk or something, right?
Which is definitely indicative of the time, too.
Yeah. It's not a meal I'd be eating anytime soon.
Yeah, fuck that. Piss break. All right, we're at the parlor. And so, like, when they're eating, it's just her. Like, she's just the one. She's the only one eating. Like, he doesn't bring him food for himself. Mm-hmm. And when we're walking into this parlor, it's like we get to find out that Norman Bates is into taxidermy.
Specifically, birds.
Yeah, and because as she's walking in, there's just like it kind of shows you there's an owl and like birds like propped up on branches, like stuffed and everywhere, and it's I can only imagine like how uncomfortable that must feel.
It's a little creepy.
Yeah, it kind of like it removes your initial impression of Norman Bates at this point. Mm-hmm. Like it kind of makes you a little like questionable of him because it's just an odd thing to do.
In a way, it does. I mean, like I feel like throughout. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. This dialogue absolutely. That Marion Crane and Norman Bates have in the parlor. It's like this is like the longest scene of dialogue that we have in the movie. Like just back and forth
between two characters. Yeah.
Yeah. It's we get a lot of conversation about Norman Bates like talking about his mom. Because Marion obviously brings up, like, well, I'm not too welcome here, obviously.
Because she overheard it, and he knows, too.
Yeah. And,
Well, he knows. Continue, sorry.
And, the acting in this scene by Anthony Perkins, who plays Norman Bates, is so good, in my opinion. Because his mannerisms, his emotions...
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Do they not, like, jump... Like, he's, like, elated and excited and like, serious and downtrodden
he
or
has
whatever.
A very, like, he's moving emotion to emotion very quickly. And I was going to say, like, anytime he is on screen, he grabs the attention. He's a very mysterious character. And you're kind of seeing them work through this, like, she's like, well, do you... like enjoy it like he's like, well, my mother's sick, like she hasn't been well in a long time. When she's like, they talk about how his mother has had a man and her dad, and when her dad when his dad died, that she became ill and she hasn't been the same since, and she's like, well, why don't you take her somewhere? Or, like, take her someplace.
Like, what, you mean an institution?
Yeah.
Kind of like one of those, like, anxiety-ridden moments right there.
You kind of get to see his aggression towards Marion, too. He's like, I could never put her in a place like that. Talking about when he said, in a room full of, like, laughs and crying and, like, talking about how, like, lifeless those places are. And so he's like, I could never put her there, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, like I didn't mean to offend, like I was only trying to comfort your, basically you getting fucking yelled at by your mother.
Yeah,
you're a grown ass man, and he's like, well, me, like he's saying like me and you kind of get a view of the way, or like his view of his life, because he's like, well, mother and I. And she's trying to treat him like a man, and he's acting like a child.
Yeah.
Like he's like a boy, not a man.
She questions him about, like, well, don't you have any friends around here? Yeah. And he's like, well, the best friend a boy can have is his mother. Yeah. Which is, like, a creepy line.
It is.
On its own.
It's tough because I feel like if there was a third character, if there's a third person, I feel like they would interject and say, like, you're a grown-ass man. But in her situation, I mean, that's what I thought. Like, as a viewer, it's like, you're a grown-ass man. Like, you don't have to think like that. And then so you get a little bit of an insight to his psychology and the way he treats his mother. And you can only feel the anxiety and the the stepping around of the situation that Marion has to go through, like trying to basically get herself out of the situation and navigate back to comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean it does end where like it's like, okay, well, like, don't worry about it.
They do end the conversation like peacefully. I feel like Marianne walks away with this conversation with like a changed attitude,
Mm-hmm.
considering the situation that she's in
Mm-hmm.
with the money that
Mm-hmm.
she stole, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, she stole it. Yeah.
Like hearing like Norman talk about like how much he cares about his mom. She goes back to her motel room after this scene's over,
Yeah.
and you can kind of tell that she's like I'm gonna go. Or when the conversation ends, she's like, I'm gonna drive back to Phoenix tomorrow. Like she like has like a changed state of mind.
Yeah, she's like I clean, because they're talking about traps that you set up for yourself, and she's like, I'm not sure traps is the word. I have to look at the script, but they're basically saying you got to clean up the things that you trap yourself into, and she's like, well, I'm gonna go take care of my trap that I put myself in. So we get this thing of like, she's gonna go home.
Yeah.
She's gonna return the money because she's not comfortable with what she's done, and so she's like, well, I'm gonna go to bed, drive back to Phoenix in the morning, and she goes back into room number 1.
I want to point out that when this scene ends, Marion leaves the parlor, and for the first time in the movie, we're not
following Marion.
We're not following Marion anymore. The camera is on Norman Bates,
which is, in my opinion, the true like shift of character. Like, this is when, I mean, like, main character, like, this is the shift where we are following Norman at this point. This is Norman's movie.
We get the weird little revelation that he has like a peephole.
Yep.
Leading to her motel room.
Yeah, in which this gets touched on later in the movie as well, as far as like room numbers go. And there's a painting on the wall, a picture on the wall of a bird that he removes to show the peephole. And the peephole lines up perfectly with the bathroom, which only shows why he didn't say the bathroom in the previous scene.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's something that was pointed out to me because there's no dialogue, and like, this is one of the show don't tell, and you get this, it's a close up of his eye through the peephole and the view through the peephole of the bathroom, and she's getting undressed and goes into and starting the shower.
Yeah.
Which we get one of the most famous like scenes in all of film.
Yeah. Were you not stunned to see this scene so early in the movie?
Yeah, I remember prior to seeing this movie, because we have talked about it at work, and I remember saying to you, because this is before you had suggested it. This is when you were talking about watching it for the first time, and I was like, isn't it like a whodunit? Because we were kind of referencing, sorry, my drunkenness is
I'm pretty buzzed already too. I'm having a hard time finding words.
I'm trying to think. What's that movie? Daniel Craig, Jamie Lee Curtis, whodunit, just came out. Knives Out. Yeah.
Yeah, Knives Out.
I was like, is it like Knives Out, like a whodunit? And you're like, kinda. I was like, well, I know like those scenes pretty early in the film, right? And you're like, yeah, it's pretty early. And so we had talked about it a little bit before you had even suggested. I didn't know you were suggesting this movie.
Yeah.
When we did Manchester by the Sea. So, yeah, like it is early. So it's like, basically the scene's set up like you get her in the shower, and it's her in the shower, which is like it's another to add to the controversy too of the movie.
Like basically nude.
Yeah. Which you don't see anything. There's actually never any like explicit like nipple or breast. It's kind of hidden. It's never shown, but it's implied. obviously, because she's in the shower. Like, I don't know anybody that showers in their clothes. So,
Yeah.
and there you can see, like, through the shower curtain that someone walks through the door, and it's basically a shadowed figure, which is it's not explained who this is, but it looks like a woman.
When they rip open the curtain, it's like long hair, like wearing a dress.
Yeah, like nightgown.
You can only see like they're like blackened out because of the lighting.
Yeah,
used in the scene,
which we can assume is Norman's mother because it's the only other female in the vicinity, and and then Norman is in the house and is like mother, like the blood, like.
We can't skip over the scene itself though.
No. Yeah, sorry.
How do you think, like, how do you feel knowing that this scene is so well known? Like, you've probably seen clips of it at some point.
Yeah,
in your life,
absolutely.
Right? Like, seeing it in the context of the movie, even like being familiar with the scene, I feel like its execution is like just as
it's like fresh.
It like. My buzzness is having a hard time finding words for this right now.
That's okay.
It's like it leaves an impact on you.
Yeah.
Like even though you're familiar with what's happening and what's going to happen, the execution of the scene is so good.
I actually want to say that the music of the movie, like this is a famous sound clip.
I wanted to bring this up earlier.
The screeching, it's so hard to do. I'm not gonna fuck it up with my mouth.
The soundtrack itself in this scene sounds like stabs, like stabbing of a knife.
It's like screeching.
You've
heard it before. It's like ding 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 dun 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 dun. That's a very famous sound.
It's perfect for the scene. Like it's the soundtrack for this is so good.
Yeah,
I wanted to bring it up earlier. This movie starts with music.
Yeah,
right away. It's like those rushing like string sections. Like this whole movie has like a sense of anxiety about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because go ahead.
But this scene itself is like where like the strings hit like a climax. Like this is the only scene in the movie where it's like dun dun dun.
Yeah,
like,
it's this is like the showcase of the soundtrack. This is like what we've been leading up to. The anxiety to this point is here, and this is the catalyst for the rest of the movie. The soundtrack. I mean, when the movie opens, it's all credits, which is something like indicative of the time too, because credits usually don't open like this in most movies. It's usually at the end after the film, and like you said, that it is like has an anxiety to it because like you're not comfortable pretty much the whole way up to this point. Like the movie doesn't really give you time to breathe, and like whether it's visually, like we said, in the filmography and the way the camera, like the scenes are shot, the way everything feels so condensed. There is a very mysterious atmosphere to the entire movie up until this point.
I agree with that.
And you were saying like that sound, like it is executed well. And like it's really not that violent. Like there's not like specific gore and stabbing and like
you never see like
true like knife entering the body.
Yeah,
or like blood spewing everywhere. It's like you can just see her like struggling in the shower and like basically getting stabbed to death in the shower.
How do you feel about the way that this scene is like edited? Like, is this not, this scene is edited so weird.
It's, like, cut fast.
Like, we're getting cuts of the knife, and then cuts of Marion Crane in the shower.
Like, struggling, yeah.
But you never see any blood until afterward.
Yeah, when it's in the drain and through the water.
Like is this anonymous person actually stabbing her this many times?
Yeah, like
there's like a dreamy kind of like vibe about the scene.
Yeah,
like it's like not reality in a way or something.
Yeah, you're and it's probably indicative of the time too, because like nowadays it wouldn't be that abnormal to see that like shown visually like to us as an audience, but the fact that you're like it does leave a lot to the imagination, and it keeps you thinking through the scene. Like there's a lot of like work that the viewer has to do in a lot of scenes, in my opinion. Like it's almost like a project for the viewer to like, because like I said, through the dialogue, like the dialogue is a little bit complex because just the formality of things and like the different ways we talk now compared to the dialect of the time. It's like it's work, and like like this spot in the, like it gives you time to imagine. It's like not necessarily a super fast scene. It's just like you're just like,
It's only like 20 seconds, maybe.
yeah, it's like
But it's super effective, though.
yeah, she's like, you're just seeing her struggle, and basically like the stabbing happens, and she, like the character that's stabbing, the woman that's stabbing has left. She just stab, and then walks out the bathroom door, and you're left with Marion like basically against the tile wall, like falling down, grabbing the shower curtain and grabbing the wall, and basically falling over and dying. And we're in her, like, and like I said, Norman up at the house is like, "Mother, how could you do so?" Like, and so
there's blood.
yeah,
Blood.
and
His delivery of that line is really great.
yeah,
by the way.
it's like boyish. It's very boyish.
Yeah,
it's
it
very
is.
childlike, and so, and then Norman, we don't even get to really see her body. Like after this, like Marion's character is basically gone from all like presence of the scene. Like she's not present. Besides, he comes in and like basically looks in the bathroom, which we don't even see the body. It's basically like almost like hip up, like you don't really like, but you get to see him like oh my god, there's a dead body in the bathroom.
His reaction to finding the dead body is great. Do you think that the structure of this plot is like experimental for the time? Because like this whole movie, I mean, this is like maybe 45 minutes, an hour in, possibly.
It's probably about 45 minutes in.
It's like we spent almost this whole movie, like as a viewer, invested in Marion Crane, and like now it's like she's dead.
Yeah, she's dead, and like we're like I said earlier, like it's a transition of like, well, this is Norman's movie now.
Yeah.
And we basically have to see like Norman like get a mop and like
it's very meticulous the way he cleans up the because there's like a whole like 3 minutes where he's like mopping and scrubbing and like
and
no dialogue. We're just watching him clean up the crime scene.
Again, a show not tell. His mannerisms, his like facial expressions are very like there's emotion, and like him trying to keep it together and like not freak out and like try to keep cool. I'm basically like cleaning up a dead body, and he puts her in like some sort of plastic, almost like parchment paper type, folds her up, and he backs in the car.
He puts it in the trunk of the car, and
her new car, her used car.
There's this great shot where the camera pans over the hotel room, and then it focuses on the newspaper where she stuffed the money earlier.
Yeah, we can't forget that. Yeah,
and it's like the money was the catalyst for the whole plot of this movie up to this point, and it does not matter anymore.
Nope.
Like the money has no bearing on the plot from this point on.
Yeah, you're right. He's like takes all her belongings out and puts them back in the suitcase, and we kind of get to see the money was left on the dresser, and like the viewer knows that the money's on the dresser in the newspaper,
But Norman doesn't
know. And he's like trying to gather all her belongings, basically cleaning up the crime scene. And as he puts the body in the trunk, it's like weird because you can hear all the sound of like him laying her in the trunk and the body laying down. It's like I said, very visual, very like no dialogue. So it's very like you're working through this with Norman. Like you're in the scene. You're paying attention to everything that he's doing. And you can't forget the newspaper. And he finally sees the newspapers like of the Los Angeles Times and puts it in the suitcase, or he puts it in the trunk of the car. And then this is one of the weird moments in the movie where he takes her to this swamp.
Yeah, some kind of like quicksand, swampy,
like some like sort of bayou type.
pushes the car into it.
Puts the car in neutral and pushes the car into the water, basically, and you can see the car. Like, this is where really my perception of Norman changes, because as he pushes it in and it sinks like almost halfway to where you can see the top of the car and a little bit of the back end of the car, and he's like, because it's like bubbling, like gurgling, like the air leaving the car. He looks anxious. It sinks some more and it goes under. And then it's really weird because Norman has a smirk to his face. And this is where it's like, huh.
It's almost like he's had a little bit of practice.
Yeah. Or like, yeah. And that's the thing. It's like when you think like, huh, like maybe Norman is not as innocent as we think. And it's just very, like, gives you anxiety. It only adds another element of the mystery of the film.
I agree. So the narrative kind of switches here after this point. We're introduced, more or less, we're reintroduced to Sam Loomis.
Yep.
Works at some kind of, like, hardware store of some sort. Marion, her sister, is looking for her. So, is her name Lila Crane?
I will double check. But, yeah, let's just say her sister.
Her sister comes to ask Sam Loomis some questions at his job, and she has brought along a private detective.
Lila. You're right. Which is Martin Balsam, as Martin Balsam plays
Arbogast.
Milton Arbogast, yeah. Which he's the private investigator, and
I love his introduction scene.
I do too, because basically it's Sam gets confronted by Lila, like, is she here? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I don't want to forget this part, but there's another coworker at this shop, and this is fun. This is so funny because he's like,
you go on lunch break soon, right?
He's like, why don't you go ahead and go out for lunch? He's like, oh well, Sam, I packed my lunch. He's like, go eat outside. Like it's just funny. So, okay.
I found that comical too.
Yeah, I laughed. It was funny. And they're like, Sam has no idea that Marion was on her way. Mm-hmm. And so, like, basically, people from Phoenix are basically looking for Marion, and they only can assume that she's here with Sam. And they explain to Sam, as Milton Arbogast, private investigator Arbogast, comes in, is like, well, y'all honey isn't as innocent as you think, and like basically is explaining that she has stolen $40,000, and we only can assume she's on her way.
So I suppose that did Lila hire Arbogast, or was he hired?
He's hired by
the work people,
the Doug Dimmadome, and what's his name? So yeah,
I love the scene where Arbogast is introduced as a character.
Yeah, I do too.
Just because of the camera work, he comes into the shop and the camera is like right in on his face. Like it's like the camera standing in front of the entrance of the shop.
Yeah, through the glass door.
And he comes in and he's like centimeters away from the camera. Like he's like, and I feel like that's like indicative of like his character, because he's like a private eye, so he's like looking closely at things.
Yeah, he's inspecting every little thing.
So as a viewer, we're like forced to inspect like him the first time we see him. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think it was clever camera work.
I do too.
In my opinion.
I think you're right, because he's like he's someone we don't know, and he like you said, his introduction is like he's an investigator, and we only get to know that after he walks in. But it's like he's a mysterious guy that we haven't known up until this point, and so when he walks in, he's like, well, I'm the investigator, and let me tell you, she ain't innocent, and we're gonna have to get to the bottom of this, basically.
He doesn't even believe Lila.
No,
because he's like, well, with a little bit of looking, I can believe you.
Yeah,
or whatever.
And because he thinks that Sam is like hiding her, and Sam's like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about, and so this is all news to him.
Yeah.
which only adds to anxiety because we know Marion is dead. And so these characters now have to figure out what the fuck is going on. And it's like, I really love the way the rest of this movie is done because it is focused on them trying to figure out what we already know.
I feel like the plot really kicks in after this point. How do you feel about the narrative of the movie kind of takes, like, the perception of Arbogast for a short period of time?
I like it because, like I said, like, we have to, the rest of the movie has to continue of them trying to figure out what we know. Like, the viewer already knows, and that's what makes it interesting is, like, because we know what's happening, and we just, like, the thing is like, yeah, like, yes, we know kind of what has happened, and so the viewer has to, like, the viewer wants to be like, no, you dumbass, like, this is what's happening, like, you want to tell them, and that's why, like, it's a filmmaking technique where you want, and it's the same with novels, and, like, usually the viewer already knows something.
You want a character with a good morale to find out the evil thing that's happening.
And you want, because you want to tell the character, and you have to be along for the ride now of, like, them trying to figure out what you already know. And so I really like the way the rest of the movie is done because it's like it's just, it only adds to the anxiety of, like, in the tension of the rest of the film. And so basically now Arbogast is, well, like, I'll go up there, or, like, I can't remember exactly.
He doesn't know where Marion went, like the specific motel. Well, we get, like, these, like, cuts of him visiting random places of business and like questioning people, and he just so happens to end up at the Bates Motel,
and which he has to now question Norman Bates. This is where Norman is kind of losing his cool a little bit because
he acts so suspect in this scene.
He's a bad criminal too.
Yeah. There's a little bit of parallels between Marion and Norman right here.
And I think Norman, like, because at this point in the movie, you're like, oh, Norman's just in a bad situation, and he's doing his best to, like, cover up the crime that unfortunately has been bestowed upon him. And so, like, he questions him and is like, well, here, like, has anybody stopped here? He's like, no one has been here in weeks. And he's like, well, why don't you go ahead and take a look at this picture? He's like, does she look familiar? Or, like, does that name sound familiar? He's like, no. He's like, take a look at this picture. He's like, I'm telling you, no one's been here. And he's like, well, take a look. Shows her the picture, and he's like, nope, never seen her.
Norman fucks up after this.
Yeah.
Because he's like when you're in a position of lying, he randomly brings up he's like, well, this one couple stayed here last week.
Yeah, and he's like, well, I thought you said no one's been here in in weeks. And so that only gives the investigator Arbogast to be more, okay, well, you fucked up, so let's see what's really going on here.
He wants to see the guest registry.
Yeah, and he's like, well, maybe she does look familiar, but she came in the rain. That's right. Oh yeah, I remember she came in the rain and she looked different. Her hair was all weird and because it was
wet
pouring.
Or something. Yeah.
And he's like, okay, like, he's like, it's a bad picture of her. He's like, yeah, I guess it is. Like, ha ha ha, like trying to move through this small talk, and then he looks at like you said, the guest registry.
Yeah.
And
there's a Marion Samuel on there.
And he's like, well, her boyfriend's name is Sam, so it's only indicative that she may have used a pseudonym name, and so, like, it's very like, so he knows that she was here, and he thinks that Marion has paid him off and has, like, trying to hide. He's like, I'm telling you, there ain't nothing here. And, like, he's like, well, she wouldn't have paid you or anything to hide her. Like, he's like, no, you can trust me. Like, I'm telling you. She said that she was going back to Phoenix. And when she got up in the morning, and he's talking about, I made her some dinner and all that, and my mother, and he's like, oh, your mother, I thought you said you were the only one here. And so it's only adding to his suspect.
Does Arbogast not go outside and like see a silhouette of like a woman-looking figure in the window of the house?
I want to say no, because
I swear he sees like a
sees
silhouette in the window of the house. Cause
maybe you're right, because he's like, well, I thought you said that you were the only one here. This could be leaving us. Like we may not be 100% on this, but
Yeah.
it has been like kind of like shown later in or at some point in the movie, like there's a figure in the house. Like
Yeah.
his mom is in the house up in the.
Norman is like a terrible liar when it comes to this situation. But Norman offers to Arbogast asks to go check out the cabins, and Norman's like, yeah, I'm about to go change the sheets or
Like,
whatever.
no one ever stays here, but I like to change the sheets on X day because the rooms get stuffy and no one likes the smell of like musty linen.
And Norman walks by cabin 1 where Marianne stayed, and very suspiciously skips it.
Yeah.
Like looks at the door, like his mannerisms tell it all. Kinda.
Yeah. And he's an investigator, and so like this like obvious like oh, okay, something's going on in room number 1.
Yeah.
And so maybe she's hiding in there. Because he doesn't know that Marion's dead at this point.
But he declines to go check the cabins.
Yeah.
Like with Norman.
He's like I'm about to because he says like, I'm about to change the sheets, and so you're more than welcome to change them with me. And he's like, oh, I'll have to pass on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, like he skips over room number 1, and he's like, oh, did you change your mind? And asking the inspector like if he wants to. He's like, I thought you said you're the. Maybe that's where he says, I thought you said you're the only one here, because maybe he sees the silhouette in the house.
Like, she's an invalid and she can't talk.
Yeah,
and
he's like, well, I'd like to go talk to her.
Arbogast is really inspired to go talk to her. He's like, well, maybe she saw something, or
maybe she's up in the house, kind of thing. Like he's just trying to get some clues on what's going on. Where's Marion?
Yeah,
because she's been here.
This guy seems like pretty decent at the job he does.
Yeah, he's like likable. He's a likable character. It
kind of seems like the narrative of the movie is gonna like follow Arbogast from this point on. Mm-hmm. So little that we know.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but I think he leaves and he's like, well, I've seen all I can here, and he goes to the phone booth and is calling Sam and Lila and is saying, well, I think I know what's going on. I'm gonna go back up there and talk to Mrs. Bates and see if I can get any more information. Mm-hmm. And so this scene, bro.
Oh man, he goes back to the house, and I don't know if this is like an example of like the time that this movie was made in, mm-hmm. but like he like lets himself into the house. Mm-hmm. Would you ever do this?
No, it's really weird. I guess like obviously since we've seen it, we know what happens, but like it is weird like that he just walks in and he's like, Mrs. Bates, like kind of walks up the stairs.
Most like sensible people would not just let yourself into like someone's residence.
Yeah. But I mean, because especially if you're a private investigator, like
you need a warrant.
When she had talked about to Norman, like, do I need a warrant for that? And he's like, and it's just like kind of awkward, like at this point, like for him to just let himself in.
So if he would have successfully gone into the house and like found evidence,
yeah,
it wouldn't have like held up in court or anything, probably.
Yeah, but maybe he knows that she's ill and like maybe she's kind of like locked up in a room or something. He's just trying. But let's just say like he's walking up the stairs, and it's really this is a weird.
I love the way that this scene is directed.
I do too. But there's a funny thing I wanted to point out, but he's walking up and he's like Mrs. Bates, and we can see on the left there's a door, and
on the right. Well, there might be doors on the left and right.
Yeah, but she comes out like if you're going up the stairs, it's to the left.
If you're like talking from Arbogast's perspective,
it's left.
Yeah, but from the audience view, it's right.
Yeah,
right,
and yeah. So it comes out.
Not to get too particular.
Yeah. So we get to see Mrs. Bates comes out again, and basically she slices
Like his face?
Face, like you get to see, like this is like an actual, like you get to see a wound for the first time. Basically gets slashed across the face and he falls down the stairs. But the way it's shot, like obviously it's like a very serious scene, but I couldn't help but be pulled out a little bit of it because it's showing him basically falling down the stairs, but like
he's like walking backwards.
yeah, and he's like got his arms flat up in the air, like but to kind of like show that he's falling down the stairs because they couldn't like really shoot it, I guess, like him actually falling down.
I agree and disagree at the same time.
Okay, continue.
Like it is a little goofy looking, but if you take into account like the first murder scene, there's only two murder scenes in this movie.
It's Marion and Arbogast, yeah.
There's a very dreamlike quality to both murder scenes. I mean, like the shower scene was like kind of nonsensical in the way that it was cut. Like you see stabs and whatever, multiple stabs and nothing blood, relating to that. The Arbogast scene when he's walking up, the cinematography, like the background is super hazy and dreamlike, and then like him falling down the stairs is hazy and dreamlike. I feel like it's just like a dramatic like director's it's choice.
It's a very like a callback to the first murder scene. You're right, but it is like it's just kind of weird like in today's.
It's dated, but I mean I think it's effective.
No,
like,
it
watching back.
It definitely works.
I love the camera angle, like when he's reaching the top of the stairs, we get this like overhead camera angle of like we're like looking up from the ceiling, and like it doesn't cut a whole lot. Like he's walking up, and the door opens, and the woman comes out,
and just
like it's scarier because it was cut that way,
and it's fast. Like it's such a fast scene. Like it happens very quickly, but like you're really nervous for him as he's walking up the stairs. Like it's really weird.
I incorrectly stated that the only time that the stabbing music is used in the shower scene.
It does happen.
It's used in this scene too.
Yeah.
And it's nerve-wracking, in my opinion.
It's like because the movie at this point is kind of giving you a little bit of breath of anxiety. Like, I mean, it's still like you're still working and like you're still curious and like trying to understand what's happening for the characters, but at this point, it's like it ties you right back into the anxiety. Like it's like, oh shit! Like don't forget, like this, like some real shit's happening.
Yeah,
and I think at this point, Arbogast is now dead. And so now we're left as Sam and Lila, and they're like
our second protagonist has already died.
Yeah. And so like he was the closest to really figuring it out. And so now Sam and Lila are worried because they're like, well, said he'd only be an hour before he would get back to us because he called him at the phone booth. And he said they would meet him back there. I mean, it's been 3 hours, and they're really worried. And so they go and visit
some kind of sheriff, right?
It's the sheriff of the town and his home. And they're like, please call up there. And they kind of give you a hint of like, well, I'm not going to call up there. It's super late. And Norman Bates is, and they're talking, he said they were going to go question his mother. And he's like, well, this only adds the curiosity.
This town is probably so small that like the sheriff knows like the familial relationships that go on. And he's like,
he knows it's a big deal of the crime.
He's like, well, Norman Bates' mother has been dead for so and so years.
He's like, but the investigator said that like he was going to go question his mother. He's like, well, that doesn't make any sense because she's been dead for years. And so it's like, the movie moves really fast. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it,
it does. There's a lot of like filler moments, but like the scenes where action takes place, it's like snappy.
Yeah,
you know.
And like, well, they call up. He finally calls, and they finally get him to, call and pay attention, and like, okay, I'll call. And so. And they say, like Norman said, everything's okay. Like, the inspector said that he was there earlier that day, but hasn't, you know. And they're like, well, that's awfully weird for him not to say anything. He said that he thought, like
to like check back in on like with us.
He said he was like, well, yeah, he wouldn't have just not said anything to us after he left, basically. And so it's like only adds to Sam and Lila's curiosity, and they can't get anyone to go up there. And so we'll basically get them like trying to decide like what should we do, and they're like, well, we're gonna go up there and figure it out ourselves. And they say that they're going to check in as a couple that way. Like this, like, I love the way this is done because they, using their wits to try to outwit Norman. And they're like, we'll check in as a couple and we'll figure it out for ourselves because, and like, well, isn't that breaking the law and like all that and yada yada. And they're going to take matters into their own hand, which like this is the last like real hurrah of the movie. Piss break.
It's way better than a Red's Apple Ale. I will say that.
Yeah, Red's Apple Ale is really tart. This is really sweet.
This tastes like cider.
Yeah, it's by the way, we sometimes when we're drinking strong beer, we decide to put light beers in between them because when we do beer of choice, sometimes it's not the easiest for conversation. So when we do try a beer, it's like we try to cut it with a lighter beer.
Yeah.
We're drinking Cider Boys.
I think that's been the case for like almost every podcast we've done so far.
The strong beer definitely get the conversation rolling. I will say that. But the Cider Boys is really, really good. I enjoy it. It's really, really sweet. Hopping back into, they're going to take matters into their own hand. They're checking in as a couple, and Norman is acting normal as fuck. He's just checking
some regular customers into the hotel.
Yeah, and he's like, okay, yeah, not a big deal. And he has no idea who these people are, so...
They're, like, Sam Loomis is really adamant about, well, we need to check into the guest registry.
He's like, yeah, we're on a business trip, and it's 90% business. And he's like, I really need a receipt. And he's like... So Norman, at this point, is like, well, I'm not going to have anybody check in the registry just in case someone comes back to ask.
Because they do sign in, though, right?
Yes, and he's like... Because he's like, well, I really insist on having my name in the registry and having a receipt for the business trip. My boss is paying for the trip. So basically Norman was trying to gloss over it, and he's like, okay, I'll take care of that for you. And so, like, they do that, and he's like, I'll go grab your bags. Oh, we ain't got any. What? We have none. He's like, okay.
That's a suspicious, like, right off the bat.
Yeah,
right
it's
there.
very quick, and it...
On a business trip with no bags.
Yeah, and it... And Norman's like, okay, that's cool. And it adds tension between them and, like, kind of like, very curious. Like, for Norman has a reason to be curious now. And
in all honesty, Lila kind of looks like Marion in a way, like their hairstyles and stuff. So
yeah, he talks about, like, he's like, okay. And he's like, that's curious. I've never seen he's like, every other place I've stayed in the States have always required, you to pay extra with no bags.
You got to pay beforehand if you don't have bags.
Yeah, and it's like $10, and so it's just really weird. It just adds this point of tension between the characters, and then not Marion, but Lila goes ahead and says, I'll go on ahead, because he puts him in cabin 10, and so she's like, well, I'll go on ahead, and they walk out and they go towards the cabin, and they know that Marion was in cabin 1, and they need to get in that cabin to see if she's in there or whatever. And
they kind of like devise a plan. Like Sam Loomis is going to go up to the parlor or the receptionist or whatever area to distract Norman Bates, and Lila is going to go check the house on her own
and try to talk to Mrs. Bates. Sorry, by the way, guys. The challenge of the podcast is that since we're drinking, it's much harder to move the plot along and move scenes along because we're trying our our best to move along.
I'm decently lit up.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Austin.
I would agree. I'm probably around the same way, but it's just harder to stay on track and stay in the moment of the scenes and stuff. So
that's like the fun of it, though.
Yeah,
that's why we're two dudes brews and reviews.
That's right, because it's the brew definitely adds some element to the podcast. But this is the end of the movie, honestly. Like it's like you're just hoping to see some resolution between the characters, and like so for them to get some answers, and it's just really like it just creates such tension because you know what's happened and you're waiting for these characters to see what has happened, and you just want them to get the resolution. And this is one of the things I want to talk about as far as the showing of the scene, like the showing of the characters, their tension and their not even not the dialogue, but the telling of their bodies and the way they are on the camera. Like, since Sam has to go and distract Norman, he stands right in the doorway of the office, and Norman's like, "Are you looking for me?" He's like, "Yeah, actually." And he stands right in the doorway, and it looks like Norman's trying to walk out to see where Lila is.
Yeah.
And Norman cannot move past Sam. And it's just one of those moments where you can see what Sam's trying to do and you can see what Norman's trying to do. And they're conflicting right here in the door frame.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Sam is pushing Norman back into... Like, subconsciously, Sam is pushing Norman back into the office.
I don't think that Norman has, like, figured out what's going on.
What's happening,
at this point.
He's just curious to know why these people are acting so curious.
Mm.
And Lila sneaks away. And you can see Sam waves her, like he has his arm out the door frame as Norman's walking back into the office, and he waves her up. And Lila makes her way towards the house. And Sam is pressuring Norman, talking about, "I thought you said you're the only one here, yada, yada, yada." Like, he's almost acting like the private investigator again.
I think his character kind of fucks up in the situation by being too questioning.
Mm-hmm.
Because we get these, like, cuts of Lila going into the Bates manor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she goes upstairs, and we see her investigating
like
mother's
room.
Room, where there's, like, this, like, indentation in the bed.
Mm-hmm.
But Sam Loomis, who I think is, like, the weakest main character of this movie, in my opinion.
No, I understand.
He's so obvious. Like, in the conversation with Norman, he's, like, questioning him to, like, the point of, like...
I know what's happening here.
It's obvious that he's, like...
He's up to, like, the investigation part
Yeah, like, he could have, like...
Played it cooler.
Could he have not, like, just bullshit
his
Norman into being distracted for a few minutes?
But, yeah, he can only do so much knowing that Marion's gone. Or, like, Marion's missing.
You know, maybe, like, nerves take place.
Yeah.
Like, in the psychology of these characters. But, yeah, Sam Loomis sucks at playing it cool.
Yeah.
Everybody in this movie kind of sucks at playing it cool.
Yeah. I would say, like, in this scene... Norman is like, you can just see his mannerism becoming more nervous and nervous and nervous. Like, he's getting so anxious about what's happening.
He's not nearly as open as like when he was with Marion earlier in the movie. Like, him and Marion had, like, a really great dialogue scene, but Sam Loomis and Bates, it's like Norman does not want to participate in this conversation.
No.
He's like trying to, like, break away from it, kind of.
Yeah, he's it's tough because I don't know how to progress through this scene without, like, okay, let's focus.
Hey, we got this, man.
We got this. So Lila is up at the house and she's she's investigating, walked up the stairs, goes into the mother's room, and then goes into his room, which is, like, riddled with toys, basically. Like, child thing, and, like, you can just kind of, like, see the, like, it's just so weird to see like a boy's room for a man, and it's just so anxious. And I can't remember what exactly happens, but basically Norman breaks away.
So I think Norman realizes what's going on.
Yes.
He's like, "Where's that girl you were with?" There's like kind of like a mini confrontation between Norman and Sam, and Norman breaks a potted plant
like
or
a
something.
vase.
Yeah, a vase over Sam Loomis's head, and Norman rushes to the Bates Manor, and when that happens, Lila is inside, and she notices that the front door is like about to open. So she heads towards the basement
With the fruit cellar.
the fruit cellar.
We did gloss over earlier that
Norman kind of mentioned
Norman takes his mother from her bed, and like you get that scene of dialogue because Norman knows that people are coming to question his mother, and he's like, "I'm putting you in the fruit cellar," and she's like, "You gotta put me down on that musty, like I can't," and basically like acting like how she did when Marion was first introduced to the Bates Motel.
Yeah.
And so like it's just that we shouldn't forget that scene. I'm not exactly I'm almost positive
it was a little earlier.
it was before, it was like in the scene breaking from Arbogast being there and then in the phone booth. So we shouldn't forget that. But that's why why her indentation was on the bed. Like she had been there, and she was
for a
down
long time.
For a long time.
If your body shape is like in the bed, that long,
it's
if it's like that prominent, you've been there for a long fucking time.
Yeah, and it's like only indicative of like the curiosity of the viewer. Like, like why is there such an indentation, like a perfect indentation?
Yeah. Well, like you kind of, I mean, like it could be plausible because the mother is ill in the viewer's mind. Like she might have been laying in that bed for a long time.
And it's like so we gotta say Lila is basically at the staircase. Underneath the staircase, it's basically staircase. It's staircase, front door. Norman runs upstairs to his mother, and we get to see Lila go down through to the cellar, and she like, oh god, this
reveal is so good.
It's so good because I understood exactly why you suggested this as soon as the scene happened after it was over, because I was like, man,
was this spoiled for you?
No, I had no idea what
you
was
had
happening.
No idea that
I had no idea. Yeah,
was the guy.
Yeah, he's the guy for sure. Basically, Lila approaches Mrs. Bates, and she's like, because you can see Mrs. Bates basically like in a chair,
like back facing us as a viewer,
and she's looking towards the wall. As she's approaching, she like touches Mrs. Bates on the shoulder, and Mrs. Bates is like a mummified corpse.
Yeah.
And this is another spot in the movie where that the dun 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 dun, like you can see Norman is dressed up as a woman. He's dressed up as Mrs. Bates because Lila screams and hits the light and freaking out because it's a dead mummified body, and you can see Norman approaching dressed as Mrs. Bates. And this like blew my mind when I first saw it.
Really?
Yeah, like I wasn't expecting this whatsoever. Like I could see like something was wrong with Mrs. Bates when like how like stiff she was. But like up until this point as a first time viewer, I was just like,
okay, so
I was like just shocked. Honestly, I was shocked.
So the fact that you didn't know that Norman Bates was the killer going in makes me so happy.
Yeah, I didn't know whatsoever.
This feels like a science experiment in a way, because like most people, like I've seen I didn't see this movie until like a couple months ago, but I had watched episodes of Bates Motel.
Okay, see, I was gonna say I've never seen that, and I it always just it did drag my curiosity going into this movie, but I had never seen it.
I had only seen like a few episodes, maybe only like the first 2 episodes.
Okay.
Like just from that alone, I knew that like the show is about like Norman Bates as a teenager, and I was like, this kid's kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
And that was before I saw Psycho.
Yeah.
So going into Psycho, I kind of knew that Norman Bates
was a bad character.
Was like the killer.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so good that you did not know.
I didn't. Yeah. I really had no spoil besides that I knew that Marion was going to die at some point in the shower.
I would have loved to see this movie with like a blank slate.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I didn't. I had no idea, and it was a great reveal because I felt like, besides knowing the shower scene, I did view this like as someone that was going to view it for the first time back in 1960. Like it was very, very nice.
That makes this so much better.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
it blew my mind. And that's because when I watched the movie and I finished it on Sunday, I texted you and I was like, bro, what the fuck, man? Like, I was like...
Did you have, like, any idea? Like, did you guess that was going to be the ending?
I didn't know that was going to be the ending at all, honestly. So, like...
you didn't predict that, like, maybe...
Like, I knew...
the old lady was...
not real or something?
Not even that. Like, you know, the movie up until this point didn't make you believe that she was dead.
Yeah.
I mean, like, maybe she was alive and
like, Norman had covered it up. Yeah. Like, Because coming into this, like, with fresh eyes, I was just like, I knew the shower scene was coming, and that's all I really knew. I didn't know any of the beginning. I didn't know anything up until that point, and so I didn't know anything surrounding the characters. Like, it wasn't spoiled to me in any way, and so, like, it was really, like, it was a real shock to me at the end to know that Norman was the killer. Like, it just...
That's so much better, in my opinion. I'm so glad.
Yeah, it was great. Like, I was really... Like, I was glad, too, like, because I was just like, man, like, that's why this movie is so good. Because, like, I knew... Because I could see the time of the movie, because I was watching it on Vudu, where I do, like, a lot of my movies, I get them digitally. And I could just see the time at all points by hovering my mouse up, and, like, I could see, like, this movie is, like, almost over. Like, what is going to happen at the end? Mm-hmm. And then, like, and then you can just see, like, basically Sam comes in and, like, basically, like, takes down Norman. But Norman's dressed up as Mrs. Bates, and it's just like, it just like blew my mind, and like it gave me like this awe and like this shock of like, man, like this is why this movie's so good.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah,
I'm so glad that you were surprised.
I really was. Like it just blew my mind, like, because I just didn't know how this movie was really going to have its climactic ending, because I needed this release of tension. This whole movie, and it really was satisfying.
That's the reaction that I was like kind of hoping for.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about like this scene where like he gets taken down though?
Yeah, I don't really remember the specifics because I was like super like my mind just had like this pop of like shock, but like I mean it's like weird. It's like a weird like kind of violent like brawl. It's like just super awkward, kind of like almost dreamy, like the rest of it.
It happens so fast.
Yeah.
If I have any criticisms towards this movie, I think maybe it's like a little anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Like
towards the end.
Like you get the reveal that Norman is dressed in drag as the killer, and then he like gets taken down right away.
Yeah.
Like from Sam Loomis of all characters. You know, the lame character in this movie.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, it just feels like so much has happened up until this point, and then, like, there's no, like, maybe this is indicative of the times that we live in.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm looking forward to, like, a showdown or something.
Yeah, or, like, a resolution between all the characters.
Like a cinematic scene where the main villain gets taken down. But, like, Sam Loomis just sneaks up behind him and takes him down.
Yeah.
In 2 seconds.
Yeah. I don't think the movie needs that action scene, though. I don't think
it doesn't.
Yeah.
It would be worse with it.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, just like from the view, like the eyes of a
current
in
modern
2020,
viewer,
you know.
God, this movie's 50. No.
This movie's
60 years old.
It turns 60 this year.
Oh my god, that's so long.
Yeah.
Oh my god. It was really refreshing though, because I feel like cinema up until this point, we shouldn't skip over the last scene, but I would say like cinema up until this point, as like in this current day and age, like I just feel like it has to be so spectacular. Like such great world building, and like there's just a lot a lot of movies leave a lot to be desired, in my opinion. And I feel like the movies that don't establish like a lot of world building, that really focus on narrative and story, are the ones that shine nowadays. I would say like James Cameron Avatar is a great example of world building. But and then one of the reasons why I said this movie reminds me of Lighthouse is because the Lighthouse doesn't establish an outside world besides the lighthouse, which is why this movie works, is because this movie does not...
It's an isolated situation.
Yeah, this movie does not establish anything besides, really, the Bates Motel. Everything leading up into the Bates Motel and the resolution at the Bates Motel. And that's why it works, and it's because it is isolated, like you said. It's just not... I feel like a lot of movies nowadays really... The real big blockbusters, in my opinion, do... I mean, I shouldn't say all movies have to be like these big blockbusters, but in today's day and age, movies flop because they leave a lot to be desired, and like these isolated event movies really do shine.
It's very specific on like what's happening in this instance right here.
Yeah, it doesn't add anything that doesn't need to be added, and that's why it works. And I was very satisfied when I finished this movie. Like, I mean, it lingered in my mind, like, like that's how that movie ended. Like, I understood exactly why when it was over. Like, like that's why this movie is considered a classic, and why this movie is considered so impactful. It's because, I mean, it changed the face of how women can be viewed in movies, and violence, and just kind of deviance of times, and it's just like it's very refreshing. I don't want to gloss over, like, I don't want to skip right to what my final thoughts are, because we should say,
well, we haven't talked about the ending yet.
I was going to say, like, we should talk about, we have a psychiatrist go and interview Norman Bates, which we don't see, but we basically are at the police station, and it's like Sam and Lila get explained, like, the psychiatrist says Norman took on the role of his mother because Norman had to keep the spirit of his mother alive because that's all he knew. And it's just like, it does wrap up the story very well, because he gets to explain Norman's psychology to the viewer. It doesn't leave a whole lot on the table for us to question.
I have I have criticisms of the scene.
That's fair. Go right ahead.
I think it's overly expositionary,
like descriptive.
Like I do like it, in the mindset of like people in 1960, they probably needed this explanation of cross-dressing and schizophrenia, multi-personality.
You're
like,
right, yeah.
They probably needed that, but like viewing it today, the scene feels like it over-explains. Because how long is the psychiatrist explanation? Like 4 minutes? He just keeps going and going.
And they have their questions like, well, why? And they're like, well, this is why. And like, well, I don't understand. And he's like, well, you don't have to understand. Like, you don't have to understand crazy. It's, you are right. Like, it is explanation of the time.
I think like it's not wrong that he explained it to the audience, but I think the exposition scene is too long.
I think, but it is important, though, that we get that, because after they explain, they're like, hey, is it okay if I give him a blanket? One of the deputies or one of the other like,
oh, this is
a great scene. And then it does tie the movie perfectly.
The ending is great.
Because you finally get to see what Norman is actually thinking. This is because while doing research for the movie, prior to watching, as I was pulling up, Wikipedia and images, and like, I got to see this scene of Norman and his smirk at the end, and he's talking in Mrs. Bates' voice in his head, like it's internal dialogue of Mrs. Bates, saying like, I'm not even gonna swat this fly on my hand because they'll think, oh, she wouldn't hurt a fly. And it's like, and I believe that's how it ends, and it's just like, like, Norman is so removed from his reality. It ties the movie so perfectly because we were always so curious to what really was happening. and we finally get to know what Norman was truly thinking that whole time, and it leaves you with this, like, I want to backtrack through every scene that we just watched and try to think about how Norman was really thinking that whole time. And
I agree with that train of thought.
Because, like, Norman, he seems so innocent at most parts of the movie with little hints of deviance.
Yeah.
And it just, like, makes you think at the end, like, oh, he was fucked up that whole time. And we were just along for the ride for his performance, basically. It was very, like, I felt very completed at the end. Like, that was a great movie, and now I can walk away from this thinking more about the entire movie, because I can think about the way Norman was treating each situation in the movie. Because he was super fucked up that whole time.
Yeah.
And you were just along for his charade.
What did you think about the last image of the movie? Like the fade out they do, where like he's smirking at the camera.
Yeah.
And we get the fade out, and you kind of get there's like a split second image of a
skull.
It's Norman's mother, like implanted over his face. Yeah. It's so brief though.
Yeah, it is. It's like really hard to miss if you're not looking.
And then we're thrust immediately into the last image of the movie is like a tow truck pulling the car out of the muck,
and it says the end.
So it's like a reminder of like this whole story was set off by this fucking money.
Yeah.
Which had no like bearing on the end of the movie.
Yeah. And that's why, like I said earlier, like this is the main character. This is Norman's movie, because it is it's a peek into what real craziness is. And like
this movie alone kind of gave like a lot of potential to Norman's character as like if in 1960 if you saw this, like you might want to know more about Norman. Mm-hmm. If so, you're lucky, because did you know that this movie is a franchise?
Yeah. So while researching, I realized I was looking at it, and there's like Psycho 2 and 3.
There's 4 of them.
4?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was 2 sequels.
They were after Alfred Hitchcock had died, though.
They were way after the original. They were like 21 or 22 years after Psycho.
Hollywood and their fucking sequels, man.
Hey, but Anthony Perkins returned.
Did he really?
In the role as Norman Bates in all 3 sequels. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen them. No. I heard the second one was actually good.
Really?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, because I feel like there isn't a lot to be desired as far as like I don't want to watch another movie on this story.
Like, it was fine let off the way it was.
Yeah, I was content with the way, like I was just like, like, okay, like that was a project, and it can be as its own, and I don't need to know anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it great. And like we talked about this before with Terminator, like you don't have to do it again, but they do.
Yeah.
And like Bates Motel is probably a great series.
I've heard it's great.
Yeah, and I mean we can't comment on it, but I'm sure it's great, because you do get to see I'm sure like it gets into that.
Norman Bates is like a super interesting character. Like,
yeah.
You can build like a backstory around this character.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, like, series and sequels and prequels.
And I'm sure like the Bates Motel only adds to his relationship with his mother that we would be curious to know. And like it's a great thrill. Like, it was a great thriller movie. Like it reminds like why I said earlier, like why it reminds me of The Lighthouse after watching it, because I don't want them to make another Lighthouse movie with Willem Dafoe. Like, they can't actually towards the end, you can't. But
don't spoil it.
I won't spoil it for you. But there are movies that just don't need anything added to them, and they can be left. like it's what makes art great. It's because it's for the viewer and the interpreter and the audience to it's for them to question themselves, like in their head. Like you don't need, like that's what makes it great, is because you don't need anything else to stimulate you. And I can understand why they did make more, because it is so interesting.
It's I think it's admirable that they waited like 21 or 22 years to make a sequel, because it gave the population that time to think about the ending and whatever.
It's like if they remade Star Wars. They remake Star Wars every 20 years, so it's just...
Well, yeah.
It's...
Which,
You need that generation You need new generations to be interested.
Do you know what Psycho 2 is about?
No, please explain.
Norman gets out of jail.
Oh, really?
They release him because he's kind of like broken his like bond from his mother, and he's like framed for killing after he gets out of jail. But I don't think that Norman's not the killer in the second Psycho.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I would watch it at some point.
Yeah, maybe that's something we could do, is watch it again. Or watch the second one.
Not that we do an episode on it, but I mean, like, but just personal interest. Like, I really like this movie. I would love to continue the story, like, on my own.
It's a good movie. Let's just say, I think anyone that is listening to the podcast should, if they haven't already, should definitely watch it, because it's worth your time. It's definitely not a waste. I was very satisfied at the end. That's coming from somebody that has pretty high standards on movies.
When I recommended it, were you, did you have, like, doubts?
No, I didn't have doubts. I was honestly I was curious to know. I avoid scary movies. Yeah. For the most part. And so, because that is something I have never really been into.
I'm not a big horror person at all,
really. There are people that just love horror movies, and like anytime October rolls around, that's what they freaking ground into, is just Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday, there are people that love that type of movie. And me, I was just, growing up, I was never into that. I never was around people that liked it. My parents never were into scary. So it's just something I never invested my time into. And so coming back to it, I was just genuinely curious to be like, I have an opportunity to watch it, like a quote unquote scary thriller slasher movie. Which, I mean, I like Scream. I remember watching the Scream movies, and like I really love those movies.
I just rewatched Scream 1
recently.
It's
so good. Cut me real deep, man. I fucking love that.
There's references to Psycho in Scream.
Is there really?
Like, directly, and then people are like, that's from Psycho.
Oh, really? It's been a very long time since I've seen the Scream movies. I remember watching 1, 2, and 3. And I've
only seen number 1.
They're really good.
Yeah.
Those are a great example of good thriller slasher movies.
Those are like kind of like they take themselves seriously, but there's also like a little bit of like parody in there. Kinda.
Yeah, but it's done very well. I like those movies a lot. It's but like I said, I would never have watched this movie if you had never suggested it to me. So it was a very refreshing movie. Very interesting.
So, like, in terms of acting, cinematography, like, visual quality, considering the time that this came out in, what are your overall thoughts about Psycho 1960?
I think for the time, it was probably, like, a groundbreaking movie, and I really appreciated it knowing the history of it, doing my research on it. Like, I really enjoyed it. Coming from the point of view of like a first-time viewer, I just really enjoyed the experience of fresh eyes and appreciating the time that it was made. I also really liked it just as a horror movie, thriller on its own. There are thriller movies that I love, like, I don't know if you've ever seen Prisoners, which is a great movie with...
Love it.
You've seen that?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's one of my favorite...
I love Prisoners, dude.
It's one of my favorite movies, like at least of this genre. and specifically, it has to be done well, and this movie fits that criteria of well done thriller movie.
I agree. It doesn't fall into tropes, but I think that at the time this was released, those tropes did not exist.
They weren't
yet.
established yet. Yes.
Yeah, I do want to say, recently I rewatched Halloween.
And you watched the remake, correct?
I have seen the remake.
The newest stuff.
It's not really a remake. It's like a continuation of the story, 40 years later.
Those movies are whack too.
I rewatched the original Halloween from 1978, and this movie came out 18 years prior to Halloween. This movie looks better.
Mm-hmm.
The characters act more logically.
Mm-hmm.
The story is more solid, tight,
grounded
in reality. It all makes sense. And I'm not going to denigrate Halloween 1978 because that movie is really good. I mean, it's like a precursor to the whole slasher trend of the 80s. Mm-hmm. It's good. Just watching that almost 20 years after Psycho. Psycho is the better movie.
It left a lot to be desired as far as that type of film.
This movie, even though it's vague in certain points, it fills in the spaces narrative wise.
I feel like the anxiety that the movie presents probably is a little bit more full compared to most thriller slasher. The movie gives you a reason to be anxious. Because in those movies, in Halloween and Nightmare, you know who the killer is. I mean, Scream, like what we said earlier, Scream, you don't know who the killer is until the end.
Yeah.
And, that's why those movies work, is because it keeps the viewer invested. And
Halloween's a whole different beast. I mean, there's a whole mythological reasoning behind Michael Myers, and it kind of spins out of control when the sequels go on. But this movie is super grounded. It makes sense in the context that it presents. Mm-hmm. Do you think that it's dated well?
Yeah, honestly, I enjoyed this in the most technologically advanced civilization that we know of at any point in history. It's you're thinking it's a 60-year-old movie.
That's part of the reason I chose it too.
And it was so perfect in every way that I could have expected. There was little to be desired from the movie, and even the points of criticism we had, I think, were just points of
the time it came out.
Maybe. just trying to find something to be slightly aggravated about. It was a good movie.
If you were to be forced to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say?
I give it a 10 out of 10 for the genre. I give it a 9 out of 10 out of casual view. It was a good movie.
Yeah.
There isn't anything for me to say where it's I wouldn't suggest this to anybody. It's a movie that I think everyone should see, especially during the Halloween era type.
And you don't have to be a horror fan to like this movie.
And I'm not.
This movie is there's horror elements in it, but it's not really a straight up horror film.
No, it's a narrative driven. I mean, it's not.
Yeah,
you're not going into this wanting blood and guts and scary. You're invested in your characters. You're not, and they don't fall into tropes either.
I would also give this film a 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even in modern viewing, I mean, there's a few complaints I have. I mean, the exposition scene with the psychiatrist is a little overlong, but it's 3 or 4 minutes in the movie, maybe.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, this movie has you on the edge from the very first opening shot.
Yep.
The music draws you in.
Sets the tone.
It's nearly perfect.
I agree.
In my opinion.
I agree. I'm very glad you suggested it. It was a good movie, let me tell you.
Yeah. So, Austin, if you don't have any more to say
I'm so excited
on the movie,
okay,
we will move into recommendations for our next episode. Okay. What is your choice?
I did a movie.
Okay.
No, I did not do an album this time.
It's okay.
I thought it would be a great way to change up. This might be a challenge for you, and I'm almost positive you have not seen this movie. I have seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times. It's been about a couple years since I've seen it. It's an animated movie.
Oh, okay. A switch up right here.
I was gonna say it's a different set of tone.
I'm ready for this.
I'm very excited.
Lay it on me.
This is one of my. Let me just preface. This is one of my favorite movies I have ever watched, and it is it's regarded as one of the best animated films of all time.
Okay.
And it's even different because it is an anime. It is a Japanese animated movie.
Okay.
It is Studio Ghibli, and it's Spirited Away.
Hell yes.
Dude, are you hyped?
I've never seen this before. I've heard nothing but good things about this movie.
This is one of my favorite movies, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say it is a family movie, and it is one of my absolute favorite movies I have ever seen. It holds true to all the standards I have for movies. I have not seen it in a long time.
Dude, you don't have to defend yourself.
Oh, I'm just,
like recommending an animated movie. I'm so down. I've heard nothing but good things about this movie.
I'm just so excited to be able to watch this movie again because I genuinely I know this next episode is going to go long because I am going to gush on this movie.
That is totally cool.
It is one of my favorite movies, and I am so excited that you're going to get a chance to watch it.
Dude, I'm psyched.
All right. Well, with that being said, we'll have to tune into the next one. We're going to do Studio Ghibli, Spirited Away, and we're going to come at you next time here on Two Dudes Brews and Reviews. I'm Austin Purdue.
I'm Alex Getter.
And thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.
Adios.